Week 14, Hoodats, welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak, gearing up for a monster matchup in the Caesars Superdome. 5-7 versus 1-11 NFC South heavyweights, or not?
Yeah, not optimal by any
Trying
stretch.
to hype it up.
The only good thing I can say, it's funny because I don't think there's going to be a lot of Panthers fans traveling. So will the seats just be empty this time?
Wait, there might be Detroit Blue left over that might be confused with Panthers fans. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a whole thing, and we're going to talk about this first segment. I kind of want to talk about the booing. I want to talk about the state of the Superdome and why home games don't feel like home games. And we had Mickey Loomis talk, and he never really says anything, but at the same time, these last couple of weeks, he said stuff that it's like it's like he's doing his normal not saying stuff, but he's saying stuff that's like, what are you talking about? So I want to get into that. He's also kind of at his wit's end with some of this stuff, and like you don't hear him kind of get exasperated very often, but he did in this. So we're gonna listen to that. We're also gonna talk to Desmond Johnson, host of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast with former NFL running back Jonathan Stewart, going to give us the lowdown on you think things are miserable in Saints land right now.
We can top that.
Just wait until you end up in the scenario where you're 1-11 and have no first round pick. Like, you thought it was bad for the Saints last year because they're going to give up a top 10 pick maybe to the Eagles. Well, you're not giving away the number 1 overall pick. Oh God. Like, that's a franchise altering pick that you will not make. Someone else gets to make it. They could trade it back to you and get even more.
And the new coach you brought in to lead that high draft pick that you moved up for and gave up all these assets is now gone.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
No.
But one thing that means is that you're going to get a team that shows up and has no incentive. Like that team is going to be playing to win, right? Like, this is the time of year where you will end up in matchups where the opposing team sometimes will not necessarily be putting forth their best effort to win. That's the most diplomatic way I can say that. No coach is going in and saying we want to lose, so don't play well, right? But you're putting situations on the field that like the Eagles didn't want to win in week 17 a few years ago, so they just benched Jalen Hurts at halftime of a game they probably would have won otherwise, right? Like, that's a tanking team. That won't be happening this week because there's no benefit for the Panthers in doing that.
Right.
And yeah, and it's like they're going to get the number 1 overall pick either way. But it's a good question. It's like, at a certain point, do the players quit on the team? And I think that was a take that has been floating around around the Saints, and it was a very easy thing to say when you're looking at a scoreboard with 7 minutes to go in the first quarter, and there's 21 points on the one side and 0 on the other side, and you're like, well, this team isn't playing. They're not playing. They fought back. You give them credit for that. Like, I don't think the team has quit in that sense. And Mickey, it's a question that Mickey Loomis is definitely not excited about hearing. And so this is what he had to say when he was asked by Mike Haas this week.
Temporarily, you either quit or you don't quit. So to me, it's kind of a pointless question because 21-0 is the perfect opportunity to quit. They ain't quit. They hung as tough as they've ever hung. And again, you don't even have to respond because I've answered the question, I feel like, but it is out there.
Yeah, well, that's just unsophisticated and lazy journalism, to be honest with you.
Right.
That's someone that either didn't watch the game or doesn't understand the game, and probably a lot of both.
Ouch.
So yeah, that's some fighting words there, Mickey.
Right. Very pointed.
Yeah, and even the tone. I wish Mike wouldn't just say like, I answered the question for you, so you don't just ask him the question, Mike. What are you doing? Anyway, like, why would you ask the question that way? Just it's like so strange.
I guess Mike realized too how ridiculous it is to say this team quit. That's the only thing that I took from that.
It is a ridiculous take. It is a ridiculous take, and like, there's a lot to criticize, and we're going to talk about it. But like the idea that they quit is just that's not what happened. I mean, they got punched in the mouth, and maybe they didn't show up ready. And that's a coaching question. That's a lot of questions there, but they didn't quit. And they're still playing hard, and they're playing for each other and whatever. But the bigger question is like, why were there so many Lions fans in the building? right? And this is the question for Mickey. And why are the fans booing your own team, right? And this is what Mickey had to say on that front.
Lions traveled well and had very, very good seats. What I think was atypical for me to see with the number of fans from the other team was where they sat, which was lower bowl behind their other team's bench, which means they pretty much had their choice of where they wanted to sit. It was, the Saints were able to shut them down in the second half from a fan standpoint, but it was just kind of an atypical situation for me.
Yeah, I would say this. Look, we're used to having a large number of Saints fans at some of our away games. We're not used to having that volume of visiting fans at our games. And so I would say, look, our stadium sold out on a season basis. That's disappointing to have, that many tickets that are resold and given to visiting fans. But look, I understand it. I mean, I understand the economics of it. I understand that, season tickets are expensive and you can't go to every game. And so, pick and choose to sell some. But I was a little caught off guard by the volume, as you said, in the lower bowl. That was unusual. And look, I understand it, but that doesn't mean I have to like it.
Right.
It's kind of like, the early booing. I understand it. Look, one of the things that we have here is a very, very passionate fan base. I appreciate that. Our fans care. They want to win. We've set a high standard for that. And when we don't win, it can become emotional. Look, our team's fighting. They're fighting and giving everything they can to win a game. Every player is. And the booing doesn't help us. It certainly doesn't help us. And I know as a fan myself of teams, I understand that, yeah, I can be angry and boo, but I'm not helping my team doing that. And so, look, it is what it is. But again, fans have the right to do that. They have the right to express themselves. They're paying lots of money to come watch our team, and they can certainly boo, but I don't have to like it.
You don't. You do not have to like it.
The fans don't have to like it either, right?
So there are a few things that we can unpack there. The first is I'd like to believe that Mickey doesn't think the reason there were so many Lions fans in the stadium and the reason Saints fans are selling their tickets is because of the economy. Because if you go on SeatGeek and you look at some of the prices,
you're not. You can get tickets right now for $12 for Sunday.
Right. So like he's talking as if so for example, I had Pelican season tickets for a while and I never went to enough games. So I just, I stopped getting them. But like there was a point where, I think it was early in the Zion, right? It was after Anthony Davis got traded and the Lakers were coming to town. And it's like, I was able to, I either go to that, I want to go to that game. It's a game I want to go to, but I'm able to sell that ticket for a price point that is like, I can make back 60% of what I spent on the season tickets by selling this one game, right? And especially in the NBA, you're talking about 41 home games. It's like, okay, yeah, I can live with not going to that one, right? Because I would split them, and I was like, no, I want this one because I do plan on selling it, right? But that's the case when the tickets are above face. When they're below face, that's not what you're seeing. Fans are not giving away tickets for $20 when the face was $70 or whatever because it's like, I want to make some money back here. It's like, no, they're not going because the product is not good.
Yes.
And it's like, that's why like this week, I think there'll be a big statement if, because Panthers fans aren't traveling. Like one of the reasons all those tickets got sold is because Lions fans traveled and they were able to get really good seats. Like they were going to buy tickets either way, but typically you'd hope that they were up top. Right. And so like what happens when those tickets don't get sold? Do the fans show up? Or are you going to have a surplus of empty seats in this stadium? It's something that you don't see very often. That's my question. And that's what happens when a 1-11 and a 5-17 meet up in the end of the season, right? Like,
I got a feeling attendance is going to be pretty ugly on Sunday.
So the other question I have is the booing. And, Mickey, I think I think everyone's kind of said the same thing, and it's not helpful. Right. Like, and I have kind of a take on it that people probably aren't going to like, but I feel I do believe it in that So the Saints are not going to make decisions based on anything other than the performance on the field, right? Because it's like, I think the Saints, how they view their operation from the front office perspective is they have to be the adult in the room, right? That's how they operate. They're not going to, and we're going to talk a lot about David Tepper and the Panthers, and a lot of their decision-making seems driven by the outside noise, and the Saints are devoted to being on the opposite side of that. And the way I kind of see it, and you're going to be mad when I say this, but this is what, so Steve, you have a kid, right? You're a parent.
Yeah.
Okay. Like your kid's old enough now, but if you go back a few years, if you went to the grocery store and your kid says, "I want a candy bar," and you say no, and then the kid throws a temper tantrum, right? It's like, "I want the candy bar. Give me the candy bar." What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's not going to work with me. Sorry. You're going to definitely not get the candy bar.
Yeah.
And you're going to make life worse for yourself in the end. Dad's not going to cave on that one.
Right. Like, you're not buying the kid that candy bar because why? Because the next time anything happens that now the kid knows that if he throws a temper tantrum, he's going to get whatever he wants. Right. And so the good, like any parent who's, is sensible is like, no, I can't cave every time the kid throws a temper tantrum. Right. But, like, and like the Saints fans are that kid right now. When you are booing your quarterback going in and out of the game, that's a temper tantrum. It's not helpful. It's not healthy. I get what you're doing. It's not a good thing. But, so just going back to that, it's like, you are not making an impression. Like, the situation. You're not going to love your kid any less because he throws a tantrum. It's like, you're going to be talk to him, be like, you know what, we'll figure this out. But you know who that is making an impression on? Every other person in the grocery store who's like, who's pretending to ignore it, but in their head they're like, well, I'm glad that's not my fucking kid.
Sure. Oh, absolutely right.
And so who is that in the NFL? So you, like, if there's a Lions player who hits free agency, it's like a competitive free agent thing, and they're just like, oh, where do I want to go play? What's the good atmosphere I can go play? It's like, that's where that's and I get it. Like, you're trying to make a statement, and to me, it's like, no, you are making a statement more so to everybody else that walks into that stadium. Like, do you think that's going to be helpful when you're trying to, like, when the Saints go to sign a competitive free agent and they're like, oh, but our fan base is the best in the world? And like, I walked into that building and heard them booing in the second quarter of the game. Like, to me, that's kind of, you can't separate the front office from the players on the field, from Derek Carr to this, to that. You are booing everything. You are booing Alvin Kamara. You are booing, whatever player you don't hate. Everyone on that field hears you booing, and everyone is affected by it. You cannot separate out, I don't like Derek Carr and I'm mad about it. I don't like Mickey Loomis and I'm mad about the decisions he's making. I don't like Dennis Allen and I want him fired. You are booing every single player on that field. And like, to me, I am okay with like the social media stuff and you can call into the radio show and yell and scream and do whatever. To me, I think at the game, the players on the field are fighting, right? And that's kind of the point. If they had quit, if they put on a 40-point loss and never showed up, because you see that, right? We've seen that. That's not crazy. But like, that's why when you hear guys like Tyrann Mathieu, guys like Jameis Winston, right? Guys who aren't technically getting booed, right? But it's still affecting them, right? And I just think, like, it's impossible to say we are booing Derek Carr and I'm supportive of other players on the team. You are booing the team. And
no,
I don't,
like
I'm not a fan of it. I will never endorse it. Alvin Kamara talked about it this week. He's like, I've never seen anything like that. It was like, I understand why you're booing, but it's not, it's like, I don't like it. I don't have to like it. I'm not going to tell 60,000 people what to think. I don't think that booing one individual player on a team is even possible to do. And I think that's what people thought they were doing. But in reality, you're affecting every single player on that field. And you are affecting, the atmosphere around the team and the perception of this team around the NFL. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to affect Mickey Loomis, the front office, the decision-making whatsoever. They're going to make the decisions based on what happens on the field, whether that's something you like or not. It's not going to be because the fans booed.
I do say it is a little, I don't want to say eye-opening, but it is shocking to see that from this Saints fan base. And I know I'm not originally from New Orleans. I didn't grow up with the bad news bags on the heads kind of Saints. I came around my first year covering this team, 2009 Super Bowl Saints. Very fortunate to be around for that. And that Drew Brees, Sean Payton era where, this new Saints era is all about winning, and they haven't experienced a lot of this hardship. There's been some lean years, but not, I guess, as much as we've seen going into this season, especially now with the questions at head coach that folks are frustrated with, the quarterback issues that, everyone's knocking the $150 million man. I do agree. It was more of not just targeted at Carr. It really was the whole team, because that 21-0 hole, it was the emotional, powder keg that sparked everybody right there. Even Cajun Cannon in the press box, he stood up and started booing too. And I'm like, Bobby, sit down. What are you doing? We can't be, taking part in this cheering or booing kind of thing. But I got it. I don't like it either, but man, it comes with the territory when they've been struggling so much. And then that piss poor performance of digging such a huge hole when so much was on the line. And it is rough.
And I understand why it happens. And it's like they booed in New England when we were there, right? They were booing the Patriots. Their home fans are booing them. Like,
there you go, right?
And that's what happens when you get beaten the way that you got beaten. I don't like the idea of booing an individual player, And to Derek's credit, like, he heard it. He heard it, and he went out and he played well, right? And so, like, he didn't go to the bench and sulk. I think he put together a pretty good performance after that happened. And that's the reason it stopped, right? Like, the fans weren't going to stop booing if he continued to play poorly. He played better and it got better. And that's the answer in the end, is play better, win games. And it's like, it's not just play better, it's play better and win games, right? And, if you can do that, then a lot of this stuff goes away. But I think there's a level of toxicity that appears when you, like, it's like these, like, you could say all you want about Derek Carr. You don't like Derek Carr. He's still going out there and putting his ass on the line and taking hits and getting the shit beat out of him, right? For the fans, And I don't know. Like, I've just, like, there's teams in the NFL every year that are a mess, and you kind of you want to see progress and you want to see it going the right direction. And when it's not, it's very frustrating. But I do think that there's a point at which the just naked aggression toward the players themselves is just unhealthy, when it's like the players are going out there and trying to win a game. Like, you're not, like, when you're booing, you're not booing just the coaching staff. Again, you're not booing just the front office, and you're trying to make a statement, and I get it. They hear you. But it's like, if you don't, like, it's like, are you an Alvin Kamara fan? Right? Like, are you a Taysom Hill fan? Are you a Chris Olave fan? Because you're booing them too, whether you think you are or not. And so that's,
well, they cheered when Taysom ran on the field.
I know. Well, and it's like, but you can't separate that out.
I know.
And so that's kind of my take on it. And I was like, I think if the Saints go out and win this week, I think there will be some positivity, but I also think at the same time, people will be like, yeah, it's the Panthers, whatever. I think they probably have to win their next 4 games for anyone to get really excited about it. If they beat the Giants and then they can go to LA and win a game in LA.
Tough one though too, man.
I think people will get excited, and then that week 17 game against the Bucks, I think people will get into it, and but it's like, it's tough, and the players know this. It's like, the players aren't, like, I'm not here to tell you that the rich players should not hear what you have to say about them because they're so they're so delicate and they can't defend themselves. Like, no, they can't. I just, when I see a team playing hard, it's frustrating to see them booed. And that's what was happening in the second and third quarters of that game. And I don't think that the fans ever came back. I don't think that in the fourth quarter of that game, when they had a chance to go down the field and score a touchdown, I didn't hear that noise.
Right.
I didn't hear a crowd that was hot, And so it's like, well, one of what is a big part of your home field advantage? Like, that helps you win games. So when that's not there, it's like, that's not helping you win a game, right? Like that's going to be the difference in close games, and it just didn't exist. You made life very easy on the Lions in that game, and particularly because there was a lot of Lions fans there. So I don't know. It's frustrating to see, and I don't know how you fix it. I don't know how you go around it, but it's again, I don't.
The fix is winning. Obviously,
the fix is winning. Right, the fix is winning. And again, I just don't think that's like, if you think that booing the team and selling your tickets to Lions fans is going to make this team be like, you know what, now we have to fire the coach.
Right,
they're not going to do that. If they're going to fire the coach, they're going to fire the coach.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, I don't know, a little bit like something could be a brewing if you end up dropping this game to Carolina Sunday. Then it's like, you know what? All bets are off then for me if there would be in-season adjustments.
Right. And again, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what happens on the field.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it is what it is. I am curious to see how the noise is this week. I am curious to see how that develops, and the atmosphere in the Superdomes. Like, we're talking about it because it's a factor, because it's a factor in the game itself, right? Like it affects the players on the field, even the ones that pretended don't hear it. There was like Taysom pretended he didn't hear it.
Right,
James
I didn't hear
pretended
anything.
he didn't hear it. But then there's others who was like, of course you hear it. Everyone heard it. It's impossible to not hear it. So it's kind of funny, but we'll see
obviously I get it. When you're on the field in the game, a play's happening, it's not really something you pay attention to. But yeah, Taysom, when you were running off the field and Derek was coming back, you heard those boos, bro.
Yeah, and you knew what they were.
Yeah.
But all right, let's wrap up that segment. My weekly preaching session of.
You're gonna get the fans pissed at you now.
Yeah,
I can boo if I please.
Boo me. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
go ahead and boo
on the sideline. Just boo him.
And again, like, go ahead and boo. You have every right to boo, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that. I think it's like a cool thing to do, because I don't. I don't think that that's helpful to anybody on the field. Like, you want the team to win.
No, right.
And
last week there was nothing cool about it. It was savage, and I think it did hit a lot of folks hard for sure, because it was obvious.
Yep. But anyway, we talked that to death, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it next week when there's inevitably more boos. It'll be interesting to see if Jameis is out there instead of Derek and struggles.
Right.
If the booing comes after him, or if it's very much a Derek Carr thing. Who knows? We'll see. But all right, we're gonna wrap that up. We're gonna come back with Desmond Johnson, host of Believe in Carolina Panthers and owner of TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Gonna give us the lowdown on another fan base that probably is booing a lot. I wouldn't know, because I don't watch Panthers games just like everybody else.
Ouch.
Yeah. When you're 1-11, it doesn't really matter. When you're 1-11 and you can't even affect your own draft pick with the result, doesn't really matter.
What's wild, Jeff? Second straight year now, it's going to be 2 different coaches and 2 different quarterbacks.
Yep.
Oh no, never mind.
No, the quarterback's the same.
We faced Bryce week 1. My mistake.
The quarterback's the same.
Week 2.
I wonder if they're still running Andy Dalton on this QB sneak plays.
Right.
The weirdest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, super. Well, it was the weirdest thing until I saw the Saints try to run a speed option with Derek Carr.
Hey.
And in the process, everyone's critical of the Derek for throwing to the wrong person and getting the interception, because they're like, well, you should have thrown to A.T. Perry instead. But no one's criticizing Pete Carmichael for running the weirdest play in the world and in the process murdering someone on the sideline. Because that's the play. That was the play.
Okay.
That
right.
Alvin got pushed out of bounds and the guy's leg snapped. So it's like, Pete Carmichael's responsible for that, because he ran that crazy play that did not work.
Well, hopefully that guy's recovering all right. I know it's brutal watching all that, and we were getting updates on everything.
We've been getting updates on him. He's going to have surgery on that knee. And good, Nick Piazza, good luck. Prayers up for that guy. That's brutal, but hopefully that's the worst.
Big warning for you down there. Keep your head on a swivel.
Always do. Mostly when I'm not tweeting. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold, getting ready for Week 14. Saints-Panthers 1-11 versus 5-7, baby. You can combine the wins, and they're still not. Oh man, it's not good. It's not good. But we have a familiar face/voice here with us, Desmond Johnson, joining Inside Black and Gold. Here is the co-host of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast with Jonathan Stewart. He's also the owner/operator of Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. You know, we had you on for week 2. We talked about this Panthers team and this Saints team, and there was all these pie-in-the-sky ideas of how things might go. Like Frank Reich, you know, jury's still out. Not anymore. The jury has rendered a verdict, and it is not a happy one for Frank. He's gone. You know, you're talking about the special teams coaching the interim. It's second year in a row we've gotten to the second Saints matchup, and it's not the same coach that started the year. So, wow. Des, how you feeling? How are things going out in Panthers land right now?
Oh, you know, the sun's out, everything's, you know, shiny. I feel like we're in like Groundhog's Day, because I feel like our games are the same game like every week, and then me and Stu and Skylar will get on Tuesdays live and we'll talk about it, and we'll pretty much have to say the same thing, and you know, it's wait and see on Bryce and all this other stuff, and then we get back to the next Sunday and the same thing happens again. And this has been like for really since the last time we saw you guys. So this has been going on for like 10 weeks or so, like where it's literally like the game you watched against us in week 2 is literally going to be similar to the game you're probably going to see on Sunday, unless you guys do something different, because we're not going to do anything different at all. Like our our offense now ran by Thomas Brown, who had it briefly for about 3 weeks before Frank Wright yanked the joystick back to try to save his job and land the plane, and he was unsuccessful. So now Thomas Brown has the plane again, and it looks exactly the same. It's the same plane. So it doesn't really matter the stuff that we're not doing, pre-snap movement, committing to something. Are we a run team? Are we a pass team? Like, what are we? Like, what are we doing? It's like they're drawing plays in the dirt and just sending them out there. They're just running plays. And I was talking to Joe Person last night, actually. He's on my my pod, Franchise Players. The full episode will drop Friday. The segment is out now. You can go to youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio and see the segment with me and Joe. It's about 23 minutes where we talk about the article he just put out on The Athletic from him and Diana Rossini.
Is he with The Athletic now? I know he was.
Yeah, he was with the Charlotte Observer. He was the beat writer for the Panthers for the longest, left there to go to The Athletic and picked up the beat for the Panthers with them. So he's more of a national Panther writer now. And him and Diana Rossini put this article together that dropped on Wednesday about the Panthers. A bit of a bombshell. We kind of knew, but it wasn't confirmed. Just kind of a lot of backstabbing going on in the coaching staff. It almost sounds like there was 2 different factions going on in the building. So it explains a whole lot, because if you watch the Panthers offense in particular, it looked like they just weren't on the same page, like literally like all year. And then come to find out they weren't on the same page like the entire year. Wright gone, Josh McCown, the quarterback coach, gone, Deuce Staley, the running back coach, gone. They all had some sort of affiliation with Frank Wright, or they came because of Frank Wright. Interim head coach now is Chris Tabor, who was a special teams coach and was actually a holdover from the Matt Rule era that owner David Tepper wanted to keep. So there's a lot of dysfunction going on here, because normally you don't see that. When you bring in a new coach, they kind of pick their own guys and go from there. They told Frank they wanted him to branch out and bring in guys that he had not worked with before, which should have been a red flag. He did that. And then the communication-wise, you've got like 5 different offenses in the same room trying to figure out how to run an offense with a rookie quarterback at that. And Carolina Panthers. That's kind of where we are. So,
so I happened upon that article as well. And, you know, my only issue is I'm not sure that anyone who's involved in this story has ever watched the Hunger Games, because they described it as like, oh, it's like the Hunger Games. And I was like, you know what happens in those books/movies? They kind of. Are you suggesting that they are having their children fight to the death? That would be something.
Joe kind of put it more like, yeah, it kind of became jockeying for position. Like once the assistant coaches realized that Frank's time was like coming up, they started trying to salvage their own jobs pretty much. This is all going on in the middle of the season and like during a planning week for a game. And like, they're just trying to, there's stuff where they were sending text messages beyond Frank Wright to Scott Fitterer and David Tepper about how Now, this is something I was actually adamant on Twitter and got blitzed for it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I went on Twitter during the middle of a Panther game, and I just made an observation. I was like, you know what? Bryce didn't really climb the pocket. Like, you know, when you watch him play, it's always shotgun. He takes a step or two back after he gets it, and then he just kind of throws it from where he is. He doesn't drop back to give himself space, which you would think at this time he would, because he's getting harassed every third play. Like, you would think he'd be looking for it at this point, but he doesn't. And then he doesn't climb up in the pocket unless he's being chased. And I got called everything in the book by Panthers Twitter. They're like, well, where is he supposed to go? Like, dummy, like there's people in his lap like every play and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I get that. The offensive line is trash. But there are times where Bryce has a couple of seconds to kind of dissect what's going on, and he still misses wherever he's supposed to go, or there's somebody running open or whatever it might be. So that got brought up. The coaches, the Panther coaches on the staff were noticing that he wasn't dropping back far enough. And they decided that instead of going directly to Frank Wright, they passed the message along further up the ladder around Frank Wright until he got to the top at David Tepper. David Tepper comes down, and in his Tuesday meeting with Frank Wright tells him, hey, you know what? I think Bryce needs to drop back a little bit more, like on his passes. Like, this is all like, I'm not making, this is literally what's happening. Like, like the owners tell me, you know, he needs to drop back a little bit. And then when it didn't happen, 2 weeks later, Frank Wright's fired. So literally, there's dysfunction in Carolina right now. I don't know if it's any better because some of those folks are still here, but all this points to David Tepper and, to an extent, General Manager Scott Fitter. But more and more so as the days go by, we're seeing David Tepper is running the Panthers like a hedge fund. Like, he literally, like, if he feels like there's a problem here, he tries to get out as soon as he can. He doubles down on things that he really likes, and then when it backfires, he dumps it out. Like, he has ran this franchise like a hedge fund for the past 6 years, and this is what we have to show for it.
Yeah, how much uneasiness is there with the fan base with him, considering how much turnover and turmoil for the Panthers has been?
We are marching solidly towards the worst season in Panthers history, like easily. Yeah. And I asked that to Joe too, because Joe picked up the beat in 2010, which was one of the ones that were one of the worst, the Jimmy Clausen year, the year before we drafted Cam Newton. But that and 2001, where we went 1-15, we won our first game, Minnesota, and then lost the next 15. Chris Winkie was the quarterback then. That was the end of the George Seifert era. So it was kind of turning the page from the expansion Panthers on into the John Fox era. The Cam Newton, well, the Jimmy Clausen 2010 year, they went 2-14. The difference there was it was Jimmy Clausen. Like, they had a bunch of injuries, but they had talent on the team. Jonathan Stewart was on the team. D'Angelo Williams was on the team. Steve Smith was on the team. Jordan Gross was the left tackle. Thomas Davis was on the defense. Like, you had pieces. So really, that was the team you could parachute a quarterback in and go, and that's what they did with Cam Newton. This year might be the worst because you've got the best of both of those years combined. And even if they go 1-16, they're not getting their first round pick. It's with Chicago. So that's what makes it even worse, that you can't even build off of the sorrow. Like, it's just, it's literally, you're watching you're watching your house on fire and there's nothing you can do about it. You're just watching it burn from the top down, and the fire trucks aren't coming. No one's coming. And you're just standing there watching it. And it's a helpless feeling, especially for a Panther content creator, because it's like, you gotta find things to keep it interesting, you know. And this is the first week of December, and we're already sitting there trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do?
The number 3 overall pick.
Yeah. Well, who would you pick if you had the number 1 pick? Like, stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I don't know, man. And Fitter is still here. Fitter is still here. Like, that's where we're at right now. So
yeah, you know, and it's like, it's kind of like the Saints last year, which is like, you know, a tank is, I think a lot of fans would be like, you know what, this sucks, but I understand, like not necessarily openly tanking, but like, you know, creating a situation where you could potentially draft your next franchise quarterback is like an acceptable scenario for like the Colts. The year Peyton Manning went down, they just dropped all the way to the bottom. They got Andrew Luck and they came back up, right? But like, that's it can be passively the plan. But when you trade away your future first round pick, you know that wasn't the plan. It couldn't have possibly been the plan, because if it was the plan, then you would have just done it without trading away your future first-round pick. Like, you didn't need to trade your future first-round pick to be the worst team in the NFL. You could have done that for any price.
Panthers had practice at that. Like, they didn't need to push all the chips in the middle of the table.
It shows.
They told us what they wanted. Like, Scott Fitterer was very adamant that because someone asked about, trading off that first-round pick, and he was like, well, we're not planning on picking in the top 10 for like the next, however many years. Like, we're not expecting to pick in a high pick anyway. So for us, it's like giving away a high second. And I'm like,
the funny thing is you brought up the Jimmy Clausen thing, right? Like, everyone thinks of Jimmy Clausen, they're like, oh, the golden gobbler or whatever, like the turkey.
Jimmy Pickles is what we called him here. Yeah.
But like, we could pretend like, wow, that was just a whatever pick. That was a second-round pick. Yeah. He was supposed to be like people are like, oh, you draft a guy in the second round, that should be a starter eventually, maybe not right away, but like, it's like they could have done that. Like, who's the
ESPN Mel Kiper? Mel Kiper was so high on Jimmy Clausen. I still remember that to this day. Like, Jimmy Clausen's
golden arm or whatever,
biggest find of all time, and 2 and 14 later was like,
maybe not.
No,
right. And it's just funny because like that was a similar scenario that you find yourself in right now, except the difference is you took him in the second round, and the next year you were able to go get Cam Newton, and that changed everything. That you could have done that this year. And the next year you'd be like, wow, you got Caleb Williams. All right, we reset.
For your fans that are like Marvel fans that understand like time travel and like going back in time and changing things and stuff, if we could go back on the timeline for the Carolina Panthers and like change something that would ripple across the rest of it, I would have either let Ron Rivera have another year, because literally his last year here, he went through like 5 quarterbacks or whatever. Cam got hurt. And then it was just Kyle Allen and like Heineke and all these dudes that I would have given him a year to try to fix the roster. He was a 2-time coach of the year. Like, he deserved that. And Tepper fired him in the middle of the season. The Christian McCaffrey trade is now looking back on it was so unnecessary. Like, it was a knee-jerk reaction, and you got to look at where it happened. It happened the week after they fired Matt Rule. Like, we were in the middle of the season. Steve Wilkes had just became the interim, and you trade off your best player. So the whole league, remember, they're thinking, oh, the Panthers are about to have a fire sale because they traded off Christian McCaffrey. Right. What do? Nothing else. They just traded off McCaffrey. And then they just, what are you doing? Like, why did you trade off the best player?
That was made by a tanking team that then decided we don't have to tank.
Yeah, we can win. We can win like this.
And then it was like, but if you thought you could win, then why didn't you keep
the dude that would have helped you win?
Right. Anyway, so to me, it's like, at the end of the day, right, if you feel like you got the right quarterback at number 1, you can live with it because, you know what, Bryce Young is the future and we're going to build around him. The question I have, and I think the question a lot of people have, is Bryce Young that guy, right? Like, I think everyone's kind of sold on CJ Stroud, and I thought they should pick CJ Stroud personally. I said that multiple times, but the Panthers were, oh, give me Bryce. We're going to go get Bryce. We're going to pay a premium and go get him. So I guess
Frank Reich, apparently.
Watched him through.
Well, we don't know. That was one of the rumors. He didn't want Bryce Young. He wanted CJ Stroud.
Right.
And David Tepper and his word salad, he didn't really help with any of this, because when he had his weird press conference the day after they fired Frank Reich, where he basically told the reporters, you can speculate on why I did it, and, and then answered no questions. He answered something about bringing concerts to Charlotte, and then he left. And we're like, you didn't answer anything. Why? You just wasted all of our time. But he said something when they drafted him on draft night that most of Panthers media has kind of skipped over, and I'm starting to bring it back out now because I noticed it when he said it, but I was so into them being so aggressive, because normally we're not aggressive like they were when they traded up for Bryce. I'm like, I like this. I'm here for it. But if you remember, it was Scott Fitterer and it was Frank Reich. They're at the podium. They just traded up for Bryce. They just picked him. They're talking to the media. And then randomly, like, David Tepper shows up from like behind a curtain or something behind the stage and just starts talking. Like, he's not even on the stage. He's like on the floor, and he's like explaining to the reporters how they got Bryce Young. And he said it in there that they were going to take CJ Stroud at 2. Like, they had Houston and Chicago in a 3-way deal. They were going to move up with Houston, and they were prepared to take CJ Stroud. But then Houston dragged their feet, and they decided, and David Tepper, being the hedge fund manager that he is, was like, I'm not used to having to do this. I can just hit a button to do trades and my other things. So let's just talk to Chicago directly, give them what they want, pretty much. And that's kind of what happened. You lose DJ Moore, your number 1 wide receiver in it, and a first from last year, and the first for this year, and the second in 2025. You give all that to Chicago to move up for Bryce.
And what were they picking? Where were they originally?
9. And they moved up 8 spots, so they were at 9. And he said something in his press conference. He said basically the reason why they settled on Bryce was that they looked at him as a potential point guard. And they figured that with Bryce being a point guard and a great distributor, that they would be able to spend less money on skill position players like wide receiver and running back and tight end, because Bryce would be able to equally distribute the ball to everyone. He said this out loud in a press conference right after they drafted Bryce Young. And we all skipped past it. Like none of us really honed in on it. And looking at the season now, what he said in April, that is exactly what he did with the Carolina Panthers, signing DJ Chark, Hayden Hurst, a 33-year-old Adam Thielen. Like they went cheap on the skill position players because they thought that Bryce could just Steph Curry this thing up and they would be fine. And he's realizing now you can't build a team that way. And carnage and chaos later, this is what we got. But it made me go back to what he said in April that everybody skipped over. And now I'm looking at this roster. I'm like, you know what? He didn't lie to us at all. He did exactly what he said he wanted to do. And the reason behind drafting Bryce. So to answer your question, is Bryce the right quarterback? I don't know. I don't know if they know. Like they haven't put him in a position for us to find out. He hasn't had a game. Like even Cam had a game rookie year, really his first game, where he played and you're like, that's why we drafted him number 1. Like that stuff, what he's doing right there, he's a unicorn. Like at number 1, you should be doing stuff that the other players can't do. Right. I haven't seen that from Bryce this year, to be honest. He's played okay, but he hasn't had a game, a Bryce Young game, like a 300-yard, 4-touchdown, put the team on my back type game. He hasn't had that. I don't know if he has the ability to do that yet. And a lot of that's the coaching staff in the front office.
Right. And it's like, is it like, are you calling him a point guard because that's the only position that a short player can play in the NBA? And that's what
David Tepper called him. So,
yeah, right.
That's what he called him. So I don't know.
It's funny too, because it's like I watched Bryce Young play, and then a week later I watched Jordan Love play, and they're stylistically they're similar guys. They're, I think Jordan Love's a little taller, but like they can move around there, but they're not runners. Yeah. They have a beautiful arm, but it's like, is that all it takes at the NFL level to be able to throw the passes? No, it's like I got more than that. And that's why you look at CJ Stroud and it's like people are excited about CJ, not because of just the way he throws the ball, but the way he approaches the game and the way he approaches situations. And
he's like vocal. He's more of a leader than I thought he was, because I didn't really hear him a lot at Ohio State, but he's very confident in himself too, which I love. And his abilities. And he's in the right situation. Houston, everyone forgets the haul they got from Cleveland for trading off Deshaun Watson in the first place. That's why he has Tank Dell. That's why he has some of these pieces around him rookie year. Carolina didn't have that luxury. We gave it all away. It was like, take all of this. We don't want any of it. So
that's why like Saints fans are like, oh, we should like, why don't we do what the Texans did? And I'm like, because you don't like, the Saints should totally trade their Deshaun Watson, right? What? That's not how it works. But this isn't, this has been all about Bryce Young, but I'm curious, like there is a lot more going on with this Panthers team. And so, a lot of Saints fans obviously watched that game in week 2, and we saw the team operate in specific ways. Obviously they still run the ball a lot, but what's different about this team coming into the Superdome now in terms of their offensive, defensive approach? Obviously, they got some key players back on defense compared to what that game in week 2. Like, is it the same team? Is it the same approach? What should people expect?
Defense wise, this is the healthiest they've been probably since week 2. So you will see JC Horn and guys that you didn't see, because JC Horn got hurt week 1. He hadn't been back on the field since last week. So Horn's back. CJ Henderson was in concussion protocol for a couple of weeks. I think he played last week. They're getting healthier. So on that end, the defense might be a problem. And they've basically kept Carolina in games all year. So the defense has been a bright spot. Going back to Joe's article, the defensive side of the coaching staff were all dudes pretty much that worked under Ejiro Evero before. So they had kind of cohesion already where he brought in his dudes, and it shows on the field. The defense looks like they're playing really well. Offensively, they're still a hot mess. Like they're not really – they kind of figured out they could use Thielen, or Bryce figured out he could use Thielen as a safety valve about middle way through the year. But I guess either he or the coaching staff didn't anticipate that the other side would look at that too and go, oh, if we just double Thielen, then they have no place else to go. And that's literally what's happened the past 2 weeks. Adam Thielen's completely disappeared from the offense because the defense just took him out. And then the other wide receivers, DJ Chark, Jonathan Mingo had a pretty good game last week. He was a little looser, like in terms of Bryce. He was under center early on in the game, which set up play action, which we've been screaming for, but Bryce apparently is not comfortable under center. He didn't really play it at Alabama or Mater Day for that matter. So he's not really used to being under center. Keep an eye out for that. I would expect by this point, this will be week 2, that they'll start throwing some wrinkles in off of what they, because it looked like base vanilla last week, that they were just trying to see what can we use in Frank's playbook that would actually work for us. And now I think maybe this week you might see more pre-snap motion. You might see more play action. You might see more RPO, which Bryce ran a lot at Alabama, but they stayed away from here. You might start seeing some of those elements come in. Thomas Brown was a former running back for Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. So I would imagine they're going to heavily rely on the run game. Chuba Hubbard's emerged as the #1 running back. Miles Sanders, just throw him away. I don't know why they keep trying to use him at this point.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the biggest disappointments considering the signing there. They spent money on him.
Yeah, $25 million for I think 4 years or something like that, and then you try to stick him in an offense that was running downhill like smash mouth the offensive line, and you tried to switch the entire thing on the offensive line, which is why they've looked horrible. So, it's square peg round hole pretty much for a lot of the stuff on the offense. If you guys score 18 points, you're going to win the game. That's literally what it comes down to. Because
that's a problem for us too, though.
We can't score more than that. Like, we have proven it. Like, we cannot get past 18, and if we do, it's probably a defensive score or something that happened. Like, we just are physically unable to get more than that. Really, more than a touchdown a game, and then some field goals pretty much added on to it. So if you guys get past 18 before us, you can breathe easy. It's probably a wrap.
No. Sounds like a lot of similar frustrations in the division here between the division mates. It's just funny to hear you talk about, the dismay, and obviously the fan base is being, so distraught. We had the big thing here this past weekend was, the fans booing when Derek Carr got back on the field, when Taysom, coming back to replace with the usage with Taysom. It's just funny how that became this huge talking point about fans actually booing the team. It's like, that's what happens when you suck.
Yeah, that's literally the fans ain't here for this.
Actually, so I do. So this is what and I don't know if you follow this, but this is what happened. So Derek Carr would come out, Taysom would come in, everyone would cheer, right? And then Taysom would go back out, Derek would come in, and everyone would boo. And it was like, I reported on from the sideline, and it was like, it's rare that you know exactly who's being booed, right? Usually it'll be like this broad-based boo, and you're like, well, they're unhappy, and they're mad at everybody. But you can't say like, well, they're booing that guy specifically. In this case, it's very obvious. But I am curious, so Panthers fans, has that, like, it's kind of like when you expect things to be a lot better than they are and they're not, you're upset. But when you expect things to be kind of bad and then they're worse, how mad do you get? So I am curious, has there been booing? How is the fan base? Have they kind of revolted? Obviously they kind of fired South Carolina as part of their organization.
Yeah, they do. You did kind of shoot them out of this. Two states, one team. I've been kind of surprised that the Panther fan base hasn't been as virtual, like viral as they have been in the past. Because we've been going through it. This isn't the first time we've had to deal with some nonsense like this with the Panthers, just maybe at this level of mediocrity. But I think the fan base is smart enough to realize this isn't really Bryce's fault. So, because he would be the first one you'd probably think that would get booed. But they're seeing what's happening. Like, they're literally seeing them have like all of 2 seconds to throw a football. Like, so many times sitting at home, Bryce has got the snap and he's looking off to the right, and you can literally see the dude coming off the left side behind him like this, like coming like at him, and you could see it from your TV, and you're so like, no, Bryce, get rid of it, and like he has no awareness that it's coming, and he might step out a couple steps, or he might just get killed right there. But Bryce Young is yet to run away from any kind of sack like this year. Like, if it's coming, you see it happening 2 seconds before him, and then it actually goes down. So they haven't really booed him. I think they were booing Frank Wright towards the end. And that's probably why Tepper went ahead and did it, because I feel like Tepper sits in his basement and just watches Panther Twitter and makes his decisions off of it. If you look at everything he's done, it's all been off of Twitter. Like,
oh man,
we need to trade Christian McCaffrey. He's injury prone. Like, what? He's overpaid. Oh, let's get Christian McCaffrey out of here. Oh, wait, they're having a fire sale. No, I don't want to do that. Like, let's hold on to everybody here. Brian Burns has been shopped and then not shopped. The Rams have been by twice with 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns, and both times we've said no. David Tepper has yet to pay any player for the Carolina Panthers any significant amount of money in the 6 years he's been here, except for Christian McCaffrey, who they signed to the extension after Cam got cut, Luke Kuechly retired, Thomas Davis got cut. That whole 2015 team that was still here, Jordan Gross retired. They ran them all off pretty much. Ron Rivera got fired. And they kept McCaffrey to be the face of the franchise and gave him all that money. And then 2 years later, they trade him off for nothing, really. So there's nobody that he's given up a bunch of money to. Brian Burns should have already been done with his deal, and he's still sitting here not paid. And now you run the risk of him not wanting to be here. Like, he don't even know this is going to be his 6th coach in 6 years, like, and no winning record. I don't even think Brian Burns is going to want to be here next year. So,
oh, that's brutal.
It's a mess, dude. Like, it's end times here, Carolina. Like, it's just so bad. Like
the Hunger Games. You're gonna have to actually have the kids start fighting each other to the death. It's the only way to.
That might be more entertaining than what we're watching on Sunday. Like, just let the players' kids just battle it out on the field or something. So, man, I got 5 more weeks of this too. It's great.
Well, it's funny because, like, if the Saints lose to the Panthers, right, and I think that's like, I think the Saints front office, and we've been talking for a while, so we'll let you go eventually, but the Saints front office has been
we'll let them go
pretty adamant on, like, we're not giving up on the season, we still got everything. It's like, yeah, sure, you could win your last 5 games and get to 10-7. That could happen, or you could show up at home in front of a fan base that's like a tinderbox and lose to the 1-11 Panthers. And then
you don't want to be that team.
You're going to try to tell this to people then.
That's the problem now for the opposing teams. You don't want to be the team that gives the Panthers their 2nd win. Like, don't be that team, because the whole story the next week will be, how good is such and such? They lost to the Panthers. The Panthers don't even know how to get in their own arena half the time right now. Like, it's just, you don't want to be that team. I think the Saints should have enough. Like, I haven't looked at an injury report or anything, but just show up. You guys just show up.
That's a problem. That's a problem early in games for this team. They don't show up early on.
I think that's what I'm worried about. Because if they don't show up and they lose,
the early starts, we need like a
real ugly.
Yeah, we need at least a quarter to get going in New Orleans for some reason. I don't know.
So we're gonna get another rock fight. That's what you're telling me, because that's all we know this season is just rock fights in Charlotte. So it'll be a close game. We'll get to the start of the 4th. The Saints will be up by like 7 or 3. We'll be like, oh, this is a real tight game. And then Bryce will either throw an interception, there'll be a strip sack fumble, or a wide receiver, somebody will put it on the ground. You guys will get the ball, you'll ice the game. We'll look at the box score and we'll be like, oh, that was a pretty close game. But in actuality, if you had to sit there and watch the whole 3.5 hours, you're going to be like, that not only was that not a close game, it was a horrible game. Like, it was a horrible game to watch. And I blame the Panthers for all of it. Like, they were responsible for this nonsense. So I'm just getting you prepared. Like, you're going to think back on this around about 4:30 on Sunday and be like, you know what? He kind of explained what was going to happen. This was a really bad game.
Like I said, the whole vibe you're giving us and the feeling, it's very familiar. It's very familiar.
Yeah, I need to go back and listen to like the week 2 episode.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, it was so optimistic. Like, man, the whole world was in front of us and smashed.
Yeah, we have come full circle. Yeah. All right, so this has been Desmond Johnson. Thanks so much for hanging out. Host of the Believe in Panther. I did it again. I said Panthers both times. The Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast. Co-hosted with former NFL running back Jonathan Stewart. He's also the owner-operator of Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. Thanks so much, Des. Appreciate the time, and good luck.
Yes, same to you. Say, at least you guys are still kind of in a position to maybe win the division. I mean, you might only need 7 wins to win this division. So, yeah, God bless it. Yeah, just
may the odds be in your favor.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the problem right now. You're not good enough, and also you're not shitty enough.
Right? Yeah. You're like in this weird gray area where it's like, we don't know where to put you. Let's put you right here. So, good luck, guys. Hopefully, everybody gets out of the game healthy. And I just want a good game. Like, I don't even want the win at this point. I just want to be entertained for 3.5 hours so I can forget about the rest of the world. And then I'll worry about that after 4:30 on Sunday. But
see, my sick dream was something would happen with Bryce, either injury wise, or they wanted to make a switch and we would get this famous showdown of Andy Dalton versus Jameis Winston.
The red rifle. Yeah. We're kind of calling for Dalton to start here eventually.
Wow.
And it won't be this week, but don't be surprised if all of a sudden Bryce has a magical ankle injury or something that keeps him out, and they put Andy. They kind of did that week 2, so or week 3, whatever it was when we played Seattle. So, I think Dalton's going to eventually finish the season out, but you guys are going to get the fun of sacking Bryce Young 4 times on Sunday. So,
well, that's been an issue too for the Saints. So we'll see if we can get some sacks. That'd be great.
I've learned that doesn't matter. Every game we've gone into, that team had some kind of problem with rushing the quarterback or whatever. They come out with 4 sacks, 6 sacks.
All right, good. The cure is here.
Like Chicago, Indy, like all these teams that cannot get to the quarterback, they were living in the backfield. So you guys will be just fine.
I just hope all the kids have a good time out there.
Yeah,
you know, that's the most important thing. I hope everyone has fun. But all right, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Des. Let us know where can folks follow you on Twitter so they can get all this great insight from.
I'm so glad you called it Twitter because I refuse to call it X. Like I'm just gonna keep it Twitter until somebody buys it from Elon and changes it all back anyway. Yep. You can find me there at DEZ_3505. You can follow Tobacco Road Sports Radio there at Tobacco Radio. Go find the channel on YouTube, youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio. All Carolina-centric stuff from Panthers to Charlotte Hornets, NASCAR, auto racing, all the stuff that's covered here. We kind of do it on a more targeted slant, even high school stuff here in the Triad. So definitely if you're a sports fanatic and you live in North Carolina and you want something that's a little bit more focused on where you are, come check us out over at Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for the time, man.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Keep pounding.
Oh, bless you.
All right. Thanks again, Des Johnson. Check him out, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com or the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast, even though that name is kind of tough when there's no belief left in the Carolina Panthers. But, you know, I don't, that was a long segment, so we can just drop it off right here. But I do think that, you know, when you're 1-11, you know, like Saints fans are miserable because they think the team should be better, and you know they're 5-7. Things haven't gone well, and they had a weak schedule, and they haven't taken advantage of it. It's a whole different world when you're 1-11. You don't have a first-round pick.
And I think we heard a lot from Des too about the internal, you know, dysfunction that's been going on, and Saints fans have to see that that is not the case on Airline Drive over there. There's not that much dysfunction. At least I don't think so, honestly, that we're aware of. And that's why you see so much of that turnaround constantly happening there.
Every team has some level of dysfunction, right? And like that's normal. That's how it works. Like these are all human beings doing a job and trying to get something done. It's a very high stress environment. Things are going to happen. Things are going to break. But there's a point where it's so dysfunctional that you can no longer maintain that in-house. It gets out. And that's where I think the Saints have done a better job in terms of like you're dealing with stuff. And the only thing that's really gotten out of hand is kind of Mike Thomas's Twitter account, right? And you can't stop him from, you know, but like that's just a good example of like that's the type of stuff when things are really going badly that you can't like that just it leaks out. You can't stop it, right? When people are going behind the head coach's back and doing this and that, and it's like, you know, anyway.
It just seems like a whole nightmare situation there from the top from the bottom, and then you look at obviously now their standings with limited draft capital. It's like that's not a fantastic situation any new coach is going to be going into.
Oh, I agree. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to do one more. We're going to do a quick segment on X Factors, all that good stuff like we always do. We wrap up this Friday edition with some preview of what we're looking for, what we want to see. So stick around on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Who dat? Let's do it. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. One more segment here, and we're getting ready for Saints-Panthers. Saints 5 and Panthers 11. And you know, it's before we get into the X factors, one thing that's obviously worth talking about is the Saints don't control their own destiny technically.
Right.
And so it doesn't really matter in terms of, you just got to win all your games and figure out how to get through it. But it's going to be frustrating if the Saints do find a way to win their final 5 games, or even 4 out of 5, and beat the Falcons week 18 and still miss the playoffs, right? Yeah, that's what happened in 2021. But the Falcons, they host the Bucs this week. They visit the Panthers next week. Then they host the Colts in week 16. And that's probably the game that, if you're the Saints, you should hope that's the game where you look at and be like, man, hopefully the Colts can put together a game, because the Colts are a good team. Then they visit the Bears, a team that, you know, it's funny because the Bears are a team that I would think otherwise maybe would be tanking, but because they're going to have the first overall pick from the Panthers, regardless, maybe they do go and they're trying to see what they have in Justin Fields. So
they do have their first round pick though still too.
Yeah. Well, right. But there's not as much incentive in terms of, like, you know, you it's not like as mission critical when you know
we got it. We already got number 1.
Right. Like, and it's like tanking for the top pick isn't always the best option, considering like the Texans technically lost themselves the top pick by winning in week 18, and it, you know, they ended up with the better player.
Right.
So, you know, it's funny because it's like everyone was ready to trash Lovie Smith for that, but it's like, you know, didn't really matter. They got the guy. So who knows? But either way, like, if the Saints finish with 10 wins, I think they make the postseason. Like, even if they finish with 10 wins and the Falcons also finish with 10 wins and win the division, I think 10 wins would be enough to get you to the wild card. So at the end of the day, I think they probably do still control their own destiny. Like, you don't see a lot of 10-win teams missing the playoffs. It just doesn't really happen. So, like, while you're listening to this and saying you really think they're going to win their final 5 games, no, probably not. But you got winnable games. Like, there's no excuse for not winning the next 2 games. And if you can win the next 2 games and put yourself in a position where you can go out to LA, then, you know, you have a chance. But the only way that matters is if you beat the worst team in the league, and then you beat maybe the second worst team in the league. Not by record, but by the fact that they, like, if you've ever watched the Giants play this year, you know that they're bad. So, like, if you
Tommy DeVito.
Yeah, and he's going to start over Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is back, and they're sticking with Tommy. Everyone's trying to find the next Brock Purdy, right? Like, everyone thinks, like, well, they did it. Maybe we can find it too. Like, it's not Tom. You know, Bailey Zappi was the hot name last year, and now he's like, well, he's bad too.
Who was the guy behind Dak? He got a run too for a little bit.
Cooper Rush, yeah,
there you go, right?
Good run, but he wasn't good. I mean, he's like a 28-year-old career backup, right? So, you know, that's kind of where you're at. But for the Saints, all you can do is win your next 2 games and see where the chips fall, and then go and win your next 3, and then go 1-0 each week, right?
We desperately need 1-0 this weekend, man. Oof.
The funny thing is, I'm not sure technically who I want to root for between the Bucs and the Falcons.
That is a toughie. I don't know either.
Because either way, you lose the tiebreaker, and it's like everyone's talking about the Falcons, but, like, I guess you want the Bucs to win because
they're 3. The Falcons are 3-0 in the division.
Yeah, well, it's not the division record. You're not going to overtake the Falcons in division record. I don't think it's even possible, because they would have to lose to the Panthers for that to happen. So I'm not going to bet on that.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of all the tiebreakers and what things end up coming down to.
Yeah, it's too early to go through tiebreakers, in my opinion. But like, I don't think that there's a scenario where you will end up having a better division record than the Falcons. So, but I do think that you need them to lose anywhere, and you're better off having it happen early so that you're not waiting and hoping in week 8 to week 17, right? In week 16. So if it happens this week, but then it means that you have must-win game. Like, if the Bucs lose, it basically takes them out of the running. I think they would be 5-8,
right?
4-8.
Yeah. No, 5. Yeah, because both Bucs and Saints are 5-7.
Yeah. So, like, you know, and then but either way, you need to win week 17 and week 18. So like it's kind of fun. I guess I would root for the Bucks just did so in the sense that, again, in that scenario where you do win your final 5 games and so do the Falcons.
You're bringing Atlanta down to you kind of thing.
Like I personally prefer to be in a situation where I can say I win my remaining games and I guarantee a spot in the postseason. Not being able to say that is demoralizing. And it's what we saw in 2021. And, you know, it's like, because crazy things can happen in winnable games, right? Like the Saints should have beat the Dolphins in week 17 or week 16 that year, but they lost their entire team to COVID.
That was the most ridiculous thing I've seen in a long time from the league. And of course, it happened to New Orleans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happened to a lot of teams that year. So it's not like they were alone in that.
But that was one of those, you know, I don't want to get off on a huge tangent on that, but it's like that Saints game should have been moved like other games were. But whatever. Yeah.
I mean, where that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like this is something that comes up often. They'll be like, next time there's a global pandemic, I hope they handle it differently. Yeah.
Hopefully the Superdome's got more life than this Sunday than those COVID years, because obviously it was a warehouse then.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But maybe it is. Maybe there's 5,000 fans in there again. Maybe that's what you get. But all right, let's do X factors and get the heck out of here. So, you know, if you're looking at offense, who would you say, you know, who's your guy? Who's your X factor in this game on offense?
I would love to say Taysom, but we don't know quite, you know, what's going on with him with a foot and hand injury. Hopefully he can play. But it's got to be the main man. The offense for this team is Alvin Kamara, and we see it every year, every week. He's been putting up the numbers, receiving, running. The guy can do it all. Just please get him the ball in his hands, and I got confidence we'll get more points, be able to score points with him toting the rock more. So yeah, I just want to see Alvin's involvement, whether whoever is that quarterback, Jameis or, you know, Derek Carr, if he's able to clear the concussion protocol in time. Please just feed Alvin. We know that he's the most capable dude on this field. Like I said, if Taysom can play, I'd love to see another heavy dose of Taysom. I love the amount of usage from him last week, whether it was planned or not.
Yeah, no, I mean that's going to be, you know, honestly, it's like you talk about going from from Derek to Jameis potentially. I think not having Taysom would be almost as impactful as that difference of, like, in terms of how it affects your offense and how much it takes out of your offense. Like, it's not even like, it's hard to even quantify in terms of, like, there's just a lot of plays you can't run because he's not there. And it would probably mean more Jimmy Graham. So maybe that would help people get on board with.
Would he get maybe 2 passes thrown to him?
Maybe.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hard to think of. But all right. So for me, I you know, I'm one guy who I think over the last few weeks has changed a lot of narratives about, you know, like if you go back a month and a half, everyone was on Chris Olave's ass, right? Everyone was talking about the effort and the inconsistency and, you know, the ball bouncing off his helmet in Indy and a couple plays where he went out of bounds or whatever.
Immaturity, showed up off the field too with a speeding ticket. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And like the Bucks game when he said he was kind of, you know, his emotions got the better of him or whatever, and call it loafing. You know, the Jags game where, you know, the whole Derek Carr, you know, blow up and he ran the wrong route, whatever. I think he's really, the last couple of weeks, I think he has really kind of locked in and been that guy that, you know, like he had made some spectacular plays throughout the course of the season. Like he had been putting up numbers, but these last 2 weeks, he has been the guy and he's delivered. You know, he got 114 yards in the first half against the Falcons. And it's like, you know, this should have been a way bigger game. We should be talking about 200-yard career day, but, you know, obviously the concussion, whatever. This next game, 5 catches, 119 yards. These are games without Rashid Shaheed, without Mike Thomas. He's going to be the focal point of the defense. He's still able to get it done. He's still able to get open. He's still able to make big plays. It's been a lot more yak this year. And so whether it's Derek or Jameis, they've got to be able to get him the ball. And that was my biggest critique of Jameis when he came in, is just like, you got to be on the same page with your star wide receiver. Like, I get it. They haven't really gotten a lot of work together because like the backup doesn't get QB1 reps, right? But like that's got to be a connection that you can take advantage of because you're not winning if you can't get him involved. He is the biggest piece of your offense, and throwing the ball behind him, not giving him the chance to make a play, that can't happen, especially when he's open. Like if you're throwing it up into traffic and he can't come down with it, that's like I'm not going to criticize the quarterback for giving a guy a chance. But when he's open, you got to put the ball on him, especially when you're at the 40-yard line with a chance to go in for a touchdown. Like those are the type of situations that's like you can get close, but if you're not taking advantage of them, then it's funny because I say Chris Olave, but it's more the connection between the quarterback and the wide receiver. If it's Derek, I'm not concerned about it. If it's Jameis, I do wonder, because I just don't think the rapport is as good in terms of timing, in terms of where the ball should be, and like the one
Jameis will throw it up for him though.
Well, the big play that Chris had was a tip ball.
Yes,
like it's like so. Like there was if you look in the stat sheet, there was a big play from Jameis to Chris. It was not how you would draw. So to me, that's it. To me, if you can, like whether it's Derek or Jameis, if you can continue to get Chris Olave involved on big plays, especially if Rashid can't go, I think that's going to be a huge factor.
No, like that a lot. Obviously, Olave, much props to him. I even said it after the game this past week. Kudos to him for coming back from that concussion and being able, to be that dominant force on the field for this team, for the offense, because they sure need him, obviously.
Yeah, and I asked DA about it this week in terms of he said early in the season, like this is a guy who is very talented. We know he's talented. There's no questioning it. Sometimes the professionalism is not there in terms of being a pro every day. Like you can't take days off. This is the National Football League. And I think that's a learning. What's happening? I think that is kind of a learning thing. Like you have to kind of get to that point as a pro. And I think he's gotten there. He's done a lot better in that regard. And so I don't know. I'm proud of him. I think it's a little easier said than done. What happened? What's going on with your camera?
I didn't put the camera on the laptop today. I was trying a different spot, and it's been a mess. So
now you're like way in the corner.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm trying to lean in here.
Yeah. But all right, let's get this done. X factors on defense, go.
Grandy man, where are you? It's been too long since Carl Granderson's gotten a sack. Week 8 against the Colts, for crying out loud.
Wow.
I'm inspired, though, hearing from Dez in our Panthers segment that he expects the Saints to be able to take down Bryce at will. I'm hoping that's the case. We haven't seen this pass rush hit home in a while. Hopefully, maybe a 4 or 5 sack game could happen for this D against this Panthers squad. And I think that would be awesome because we just haven't had that from – that was one thing at least last season. The sacks were there. They're just not there this season.
Yeah. it's a problem. Yeah, it's funny. You go position by position. The Panthers really don't have receivers that scare you. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, Paulson Adebo or Ike Adams should swing this matchup. But, I do want to see them win. I want to see them win. I don't want to see them just kind of, play and not make an impact on the game because the Panthers are going to have to throw the ball because you're going to take away the run.
Thielen is a problem, even though he's a vet. He's always been a damn problem with the Vikings too.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I don't think this is the same Adam Thielen that you saw with the Vikings.
Sure.
I think they'll take him away. The Panthers don't really have a tight end that scares you, right? Like this, thank God.
That's a wild story there.
Like I'm not worried about Tommy Tremble, right? Like it's not a guy that's gonna keep me up late. So yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right. In terms of, I don't care where the pressure comes from. I just need pressure, right? Like whether it's linebackers, like I would love to see Zach Bond get used more as a pass rusher.
Hey.
Wild that that Zach Bond can rush the passer. Who possibly could have seen that coming? In terms of like is something he did in college well, and for whatever reason in the NFL they were like, nah. So yeah, I mean I agree with you. Like, but I think that pressure from the linebackers is also I want to see sacks. I don't care who gets them. I just want to see Bryce Young on his back. At least twice, right?
Cheers to that, for sure.
I'm just so tired of like quarterbacks being able to sit in the pocket and just kind of hop around, make a sandwich, it's like, that's not good defense. So that's got to change. So yeah, I mean, whether it's Granderson, I'm not even going to pick a player. I just want, whoever is sacking the quarterback, they're my X factor.
Yeah, and then obviously we didn't have to worry about it last game with a mobile quarterback, but Bryce Young, we know, is not going to really tuck it and run, but he has the ability to be mobile. So I don't want to see him ripping off 3rd and 9 and getting a first down.
Yeah, I agree. But all right, let's end this. Let's get to it. Saints 5-7 hosting the 1-11 Panthers. Barn burner.
They didn't flex this game? Wow.
The only question is whether everyone gets out of the barn in time, because it's burning. It's burning. All right, thanks everyone for listening. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. Thanks again, Des Johnson, for coming on. And yeah, we'll be back at it Sunday. Hopefully a more appreciative post-game pod than what we had to talk about against the Lions. Hopefully the Saints are the ones up 21-0. I think there's a potential for this game to go kind of like week 5 where the Saints dominate and everyone's still like, meh.
All right.
So we'll see.
Definitely for the post-game podcast, Jeff, it's going to be BYOB for everybody. Everyone come, welcome. Definitely pour a drink. We're going to need them. Either way.
Agreed. But all right. Who dat? Go Saints. Be easy, y'all.
Later.